Mike Dudley here to talk about the first part of Chapter 3, and we're going to be focused on mixed delivery. Learning objectives for this presentation will be to identify the factors that impact mixed delivery. And when I say mixed delivery, I'm talking about everything from the point you load the truck from the silo, typically, to it's delivered to the paver or MTV and emptied or dumped into the equipment, and then even factor in the return trip for the truck to get a next round. So we'll be covering all those aspects. We're going to talk about, as I just said, understanding the different approaches to load the mix to minimize segregation. There's do's and don'ts here. We want to talk about those. And we're going to talk about some of the requirements that Virginia has on the haul trucks. They have to be tarped. There's things that we have to do. And the proper way for a load to be emptied into a paver. First part of mixed delivery is the mixed transport involves all actions and equipment required to convey asphalt mix from a production facility to a paving site. And this isn't going to include truck loading. All right, you load the truck incorrectly, it's prone to segregation, and we want to do all we can to prevent that. It includes the weigh-in and ticketing. You don't want to have overloaded trucks going down the road. That's not just a violation, it's bad for the pavement. When you're hauling it to the paving site, you don't want to be stopping for any reason. We're not going to take a lunch break while we got a load of asphalt in our truck. When you get to the point you're going to dump the mix into the paver or the MTV, there's a proper way of dumping this, not to cause the paver to bump or move or create bumps in your final pavement. And like I just said, once we've emptied our load, that truck needs to head back to the facility to do another round. Here's a couple pictures of some trucks. The one on the left is an end dump truck, and that is the majority of what you're going to see in the state of Virginia. Most all the trucks we use are end dumps. The one on the right, that's called a flow boy or a live bottom trailer. I've only used this type haul truck one time in all my years of working in asphalt, and that's when we actually paved the Hampton Roads Bridge tunnel. And think about it, how am I going to raise a dump bed truck in the middle of a tunnel? It's not going to work. So we use flow boys, which the way that flow boy actually works, the bottom of that trailer is a conveyor that transfers the mix backwards and deposits it out of the back of the truck into your paver hopper. But it does that without having to lift the bed. Best practice for unloading. When the truck bed is raised, it should not rest on the hopper, the paver hopper or the MTV hopper. If the bed of your truck is hitting the metal of the hopper of the paver, with that force as it pushes down, it'll cause the back of the paver to lift up. When the paver lifts up, it's going to increase the amount of material that's going underneath your screed, and it's going to create a bump that'll stay in that pavement forever. You won't be able to roll that out. So it's very critical that when you're dumping your load into the paver, that you don't have the actual bed of the truck contact the paver hopper. Truck should be stationary. What we want to do is you want your truck to stop in front of the paver. Then put it in neutral and allow the paver to make the contact with the truck. If the truck backs all the way up to the paver, again, it's going to affect how that paver is moving and placing the mix, and again, it'll be seen in the final roadway. So we want the truck to come to a complete stop just in front of the paver and allow the paver to initiate that contact. The bed of the truck should be raised with the tailgate still locked. So you want to get it up about a quarter of the way and then release that tailgate. That will allow the mix to come out of the bed of the truck in a solid mass and not trickle down and just roll. This can induce segregation. So it's important that you start raising the bed of your truck prior to releasing the tailgate. And then once you're in contact and once you begin to release this load of mix into your paver hopper or your MTV hopper, it's important that contact be maintained and they stay connected until the entire load is emptied and they've received a signal to move forward and pull off the site. Here's a picture of a materials transfer vehicle, or a lot of us use the acronym MTV. So depending on which MTV model you have or manufacturer you have, there are different options as to what all these the materials transfer vehicle will do. All of them will transfer the mix from a truck or from a load that's been hauled to a paving site into a paver hopper. It just depends on what happens in the process. Some of them have internal remixing, some of them have remixing inside the hopper, and some of them will actually only transfer the mix from the load that's being deposited into this materials transfer vehicle into the paver hopper. The advantage of these MTVs is it doesn't have any contact with the paver itself, so that it prevents any bumps or any thing that can impact the final ride of your pavement. Here's a couple other pictures. The picture on the left has to be a Road Tech machine. This has internal remixing in the belly of the hopper. You can see that big chamber there in between the two wheels. That can hold 20 tons of mix. And if you got 20 tons in the truck in front of it being dumped, I mean, you could easily have 40 tons of asphalt sitting in front of your paver as you're going down the road. That assures your paver doesn't have to stop. He can move at a continuously nice, steady speed. The picture here on the right, that has to be a blow knox. This one, if you look on the far right of that picture on the right, you'll see there's a hopper inside the paver hopper. There's an added area to hold mix there. It doesn't hold quite as much as the Road Tech, but it does, with augers, allow some remixing to happen inside that hopper. So again, you can see as the truck emptied its load into the MTV, it never contacted the paver, so you don't have any chance for those bumps to occur. Dumping into the materials transfer vehicle. The nice thing, as I was stating before, it allows the paving train to move at a continuous pace. The best way to pave any roadway when you're doing roadway paving is to set your paving train up, get it moving, and once it's moving, keep it at a continuous, steady pace. You don't want to change anything. You just want it to move nice and steady and uniform. That'll give you the best ride possible you can receive. A lot of the MTVs, one of the things they'll do is help minimize or eliminate end-of-load segregation. This particular device has remixing. That's how it eliminates the end-of-load segregation. It can remixes the product. The same time it's remixing and affecting the gradation portion of the segregation, it's assuring mixed uniformity. You know, as that load was ported to the site, this load of asphalt, it got a crust on it. It cools off. The wind going across this tarp and across the top of this truck cools off compared to what's inside the middle. So by doing this remixing portion with the MTV, it helps make the mix that's going into the paver uniform in temperature. And as we said already a couple times, it does keep the truck from bumping into the paver. Here are a couple mix delivery considerations. These are listed in your study guide, and I'm not just going to read them down this list with you, but we are going to cover each one of them in the remaining slides of this presentation. First is planning and preparation. The delivery of the mix should match the speed of production of the paving train. There's no reason to have a lot of trucks, loads of asphalt sitting in front of your paving train, or your paving train having to stop and start a lot. That doesn't generate the best possible pavement. So you want your delivery to match the speed of production that your paving train is going to move. As we stated before, it's better to keep your paver moving and not stopping and starting. That's the best ride, the most uniform mix pavement you're going to get. And as also, extra loads will cool off really bad just sitting on the job site. Next is the loading at the production facility. This is the part where the mix is transferred from your storage silo, or if you have a small batch plant, some people still have batchers. They're not very common anymore. Most everybody has at least a silo. From there into your transport truck or your dump truck, okay? And when we transfer the mix into the silo, what we have to be careful of first is that, one, the truck is clean. You know, if that truck backhauled millings or wrap from the job site, all that has to be cleaned out before we put a new load of asphalt mix in the bed of it. So it's important that we make sure it's clean, and in addition to clean, that it's lubricated. What I mean by lubrication is we've applied a proper truck release agent. We're going to talk more about that, and how these drops or these mixes loaded into the bed of the truck can either increase the probability of segregation or decrease it. And there's a certain process we want to follow to decrease any chance of aggregate segregation. Continuing with loading, here's the release agent I was talking about. VDOT has an approved list, so you have to use a material that's on the VDOT's approved list. And once the truck bed has been cleaned, you want to spray the sides and the bed of the truck. But you have to be careful. You don't want to put too much extra material in here. You don't want a lot of puddling or ponding in the bed of the truck. If you do have that, you should raise the truck at a designated site just enough so that the excess material runs out, because the goal here is not to have a lot of ponding, just a thin layer of lubrication to allow the mix to come out of the truck smoothly. Diesel fuel is absolutely prohibited. Diesel fuel will break down the asphalt binder in the mix. It will keep anything from sticking to your truck, but at the same time, it's going to react with the asphalt mix that's going to be placed, and it will significantly do damage to the product. So diesel's not allowed to be used in truck beds. It's not allowed to be used on a job site. And so there's really no reason to have diesel on the job sites at all anymore. Here we talk about load distribution. Based on how our legal weight limits that are allowed per our trucks, and depending on how many axles you have, will allow you to have more or less load for the same size truck. But how the mix is actually loaded into the truck to maximize that legal load limit is important. You want to keep your mix as close to the front of the cab of the truck as you can, so it spreads some weight toward that front axle. But you got to be cautious loading in one drop, as you see in the second picture on the right here. That is what is typically will produce the most segregated mix, because the larger coarse aggregate will roll to the back and the bottom of that first drop. And that can be, especially for your base mixes and your intermediate mixes, you got to be really careful loading a truck in this format. What is preferred is the proper loading sequence when you do 3 drops. First drop can either be at the front near the cab, or it can be at the back near the tailgate, but you end up with 2 drops on each ends of your truck bed and 1 drop in the middle. The nice thing about this load sequence is any segregation would be on the outer edges of the first and second drop, which are toward the middle, and then you turn around and doing that 3rd drop right in the middle, so it allows all that to remix prior to be deposited into your paver hopper to be placed. Topping off is never a good practice. It's a pretty big no-no. Topping off happened quite a bit before a lot of the automation that has came to our asphalt plants now. Basically, you had to switch levers and do the best based on a time to stop your drop as quick as you could. Now there's computer automated equipment that will really control you're going to load exactly what you want to load into a truck. But the reason you don't want to do a lot of topping off is if you put a little bit, if that last drop is a very small quantity, it will tend to segregate on that top of that load, and that's a major no-no. Tarping the load. Virginia requires that all loads of asphalt or anything hauled on a highway be tarped, and when it comes to a load of asphalt, it has to be a solid mesh, a solid tarp that is waterproof and tear resistant. This will help protect it from any kind of rain. We don't pave much in the rain, but we do have this surprise storms that can really cool the mix off a lot. Mesh tarps that you will see used on some aggregate loads are not allowed to be used on asphalt for that reason. And these solid tarps, they do provide a layer of insulation. They help keep that top of that mix a little bit warmer than it would be if it didn't have that tarp across it. So Virginia does require that all our loads have a tarp be placed on top of them, and it be a solid, well-maintained tarp. Hauling to the paving site. Here we talked about you don't want too many trucks and you don't want too few trucks. Too many means you'll have multiple trucks in front of your paver. That's not a good thing. Mix is cooling off. You're paying for trucks to sit idle. That's never a good thing if you're the guy, project manager in charge of this project. Too few trucks means that paver is going to have to stop and wait for the next load to come. And every time it stops, the screed will move a little bit. That can make for a poor ride on a pavement, the final pavement. So you want to make sure you got adequate number of trucks. It's important that we minimize any haul distance or time for our trucks. You know, if you have multiple, some companies have more than one production facility. You always want to bring it from the closest facility to the paving site you're paving. As far as insulated truck beds, they're great, especially in the winter months, but they're really not required in Virginia, but they're a great benefit to have if they're available. Waiting on site. Some projects that are large enough, one thing you don't want to do is if you do have multiple trucks at the job site, you don't want them all lined up in front of the paver tracking the tack. That's a bad thing. Tack was placed there to basically bond and glue the two layers together. So the last thing you want to do is have it stick on your tires and pull it off a job site. It creates a mess, and again, it's not doing what it was applied for. So some jobs may have a designated area for the extra load to be waiting. If that is the case, they'll wait in that designated area. The truck driver needs to stay in the vehicle. This is for safety, and this is so that as soon as they're ready for him to come, they can radio him and he'll pull into the line. With this process, communication is key, so it's not like he can just sit there and relax. He needs to stay attentive. Backing. We've talked about this several times here. The important part about backing is first safety. Backing incidents in the construction industry is probably, if not the number one of the number one reasons for accidents. So it's important that anytime you're backing up that we have a spotter telling us what to do, the truck driver when to stop, or either have a rear camera. They're coming out on some of the newer vehicles. The cameras help a lot with this process. But it's important, as we stated, that the trucks stop, and I'm just talking a couple feet prior to initiating any kind of contact with the paver. Once he's come to a complete stop, the driver needs to put it in neutral and hold a little pressure on the brakes, just a little, and allow the paver to initiate contact and begin to push that truck forward versus trying to make a complete contact with the paver. Truck hitches. Truck hitches, don't see them anymore. Years ago, it was a common practice that when a truck would back up to dump his load into the paver, this wheel you see here on this picture on the top, it was literally a little wheel that sort of locked the truck and paver together so that everything stayed in contact while it was being dumped. That really doesn't happen very much anymore. Primarily what we see now are these contact push rollers, which is in the lower picture. And that's, as you can see that roller, it's a nice clean picture of it. That roller will turn as the paver pushes forward, allowing the tires of the truck to roll and go forward as well. So one thing I like to point out here is it's very important these push rollers be kept clean. We talked about how tack will stick to some of the tires every now and then. You don't want tack built up on that roller to where it can't turn. It's important these areas be kept clean. Now we're going to unload the mix. The mix should be unloaded quickly when it arrives to the job site. Again, we don't want to have any cooling. In dumps, we typically will raise their beds slightly. We talked about this before they release their tailgate. We want the mix to come out of the truck in a solid mass. We don't want it to trickle or roll out. We want it to come out in a nice uniform mass, similar to how a mix comes out of a silo. It comes in a large quantity as when you're loading the truck. And it's important to make sure the truck completely unloads before pulling away from the hopper. It's very important for cleanliness and to maintain a nice uniform mix. Next is steering. Now that the truck is backed up and in contact and began to unload his mix, The road that he's paving, or the paving train is paving, may have a radius or a turn. The driver needs to steer the truck around that radius. Otherwise, it will tend to create separation between the haul truck and the paver itself. So it's important that the driver steers as he's pushed forward. Again, braking. The driver needs to maintain a slight pressure. He doesn't want to have so much force on the brakes that the paver will begin to jump or even hesitating to go forward because of too much pressure being applied by the truck brakes. But he wants to maintain this pressure just enough that they'll stay in contact until the full load has been emptied. Here's what happens if you pull away before you finish unloading your truck. As you can see here, this paver hopper, apparently this truck driver, for some reason, thought he was empty and he wasn't, pulled away, and now all this mix has to be moved. Basically, the job's at a standstill until it can all be cleaned out. So it's very important not to do this. And once he pulls away, a lot of people have a tendency to bang their tailgates and clean their bed out in front of this paver. We don't want this debris, or it is asphalt. We don't want these small pieces of asphalt to fall in front of the paver. It's important what we're placing our mix on be very smooth and uniform. So it's better if you have on your job site a designated area to clean your truck beds out. That also allows at the end of the project only one spot that has to be cleaned up before you move on to the next project. And in summary, proper asphalt delivery is needed for a continuous paving operation. When a paving operation starts, the last thing you want to do is be stopping and starting in between each load. That creates a poor ride, poor uniformity of your mix, and it'll create bumps in the pavement. So it's important that during our mix delivery that we keep a nice uniform flow of mix going into the paver. All our loads have to be tarped. It's a requirement by VDOT, and it's also a benefit for the mix. That tarp does provide a layer of insulation and allows the cooling air to pass across the mix without making direct contact. So it's important that all loads are topped. We talked about diesel fuel is not allowed as a release agent. VDOT has an approved list. You can find it online, but it's important that any release agent we use be an approved product from VDOT. And proper truck loading and discharge into the paver will minimize segregation. When we load in the truck, we want to do multiple drops. The larger the gradation band, base mixes and the intermediate mixes are more prone to segregation than maybe a 9.5 surface mix. So it's important that we really pay close attention when we're running coarser type mixes. And again, dumping into the truck, into the paver hopper or the MTV hopper, we want to make sure we raise that bed, about a quarter of the way before we release the tailgate, so that mix moves in a solid mass into the hopper to prevent any of that segregation. With that being said, I want to point out an extra presentation that's available for you online. This is coming from a subject matter expert. His name is Charles Butler from Rotec, and he has some really good information. So I highly, highly recommend when you have time, you go back. You can find these online in Canvas or on YouTube, but these would be some really good presentations to give you some additional, more detailed information about mixed delivery and best paving practices. Thank you.